Katherine Finn, our moderator today, completed her bachelor's degree in environmental earth sciences at the University of Saskatchewan. She's the manager and founder of Kinnikinnick Consulting, which supports environmental initiatives with First Nation communities in Treaty 6. She has over 15 years of experience in grant writing, community engagement, and project development, with a talent for creative thinking to overcome challenges. As the project manager for the Bridge to Land Water Sky project, Katherine's commitment to building a community capacity, health and well-being, and improving land management strategies makes her an invaluable asset to her team. Katherine, over to you.
Hi, thank you and good morning. It's our collective pleasure to be here, and it's turning out to be a great day. I feel obligated to share a joke. So my kids told me this one is, how do you make holy water? You boil the hell out of it. So there you go. So just a quick housekeeping for the panel. It's intended as a fireside chat. There's not a lot of time and a lot of big stories to be told. We're going to move through. And I'm not going to introduce our team because that who you are and part of what your project is kind of merged together. So we're going to move in that way. I'll pass it over to Michaela to start, and then we'll do our intros and then back to me for the first question, but feel welcome to share about your project and your story. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Sidloski. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Saskatchewan here in Saskatoon. I grew up on a farm in rural Saskatchewan on Treaty 4 territory. And in the context of our conversation today, I am going to be drawing heavily on my experience in my PhD research, which was conducted in close collaboration with Doeg River First Nation, which is located on Treaty 8 territory in the northeastern part of what is now called BC. And just a really brief kind of context setting for that project, and I'll dive into some of the details later on. But our focus in that work was to build community resilience to climate change, but specifically from an intersectional perspective. So we know that climate impacts different social groups differently, and that we each experience and respond to it differently based on who we are as people. So things like our gender, our age, our socioeconomic status, our culture, all influence how we understand the problem of climate change and how we respond to it. We don't really know yet how to kind of take that knowledge and implement it in a kind of community planning context. So what we did with Doeg River First Nation was we took a transdisciplinary research approach, which just means that the community members and staff were involved in designing the project, selecting the methods, collecting and analyzing the data. They were really kind of decision-making along every step of the research process. And we use that approach to ask the question, what does climate adaptation planning look like when we're kind of explicitly paying attention to these social aspects of our experience that are really important to how we understand and respond to the problem. I'll leave it there and I'll pick it up when we talk about the questions.
Good. They're already trying to cut me off. Roger Daniels, Mistawasis and Nêhiyawak. Currently, my role in Mistawasis is Legacy Trust Coordinator. I've lived and worked in Mistawasis except for 3 out of my 61 years. Grew up on a mixed farm. My greatest memories are 9, 10 years old, riding horseback through Mistawasis. And the things that I saw then, I didn't realize that some of that we would not see again. So I'm a big believer in timing and the whole initiative, I guess, with Mistawasis and our work with Bridge to Land Water Sky. It was perfect timing. Mistawasis in 2016, our band members removed Mistawasis from all the sections of the Indian Act relating to lands, and we initiated our Mistawasis Land Code. What that did was take the responsibility of management and decision-making from the department to our band members. That made it, we needed a big mindset change because now we were responsible for our own lands. If something happened, we had to look at each other to resolve the issue. And that was a big step. But then we started looking at what we've been doing, or not necessarily what we've been doing to Mistawasis, but what we've allowed to happen to Mistawasis over the years. And the use of land that was cleared for agriculture that never should have been. We have areas where I remember riding through a trail with trees and bushes and it was so beautiful, and now it's just a sand pile. Those trees and those bushes, they've been given the opportunity over the last 30 years to grow back, and they haven't. So they're not coming back. So there's some things like that we're not going to get back, but we're trying to recover what we can. And the way we're doing that is, you know, I just, things pop in my head and I kind of veer off here and there. One of the big things, I'll go back to Bridge to Water, Land, Water, Sky, and how it changed us and why we're moving in that direction. And it directly related to COVID and the issues that mostly our elders had with food security. It really brought to the forefront that we don't have food security, and our elders especially are very vulnerable when something like that happens. So I give great credit to our chief and council and our lands committee. They give us so much support, and the initiatives that comes from our leadership to think about our members and to protect them from any issues in the future. So we've started programs like simple things like community gardens. Mistawasis used to be a totally agricultural community. But myself personally, my wife and I, living in the last 25 years, we never had our own personal garden until there was a community garden next to us. And then we started our own personal garden. We have a greenhouse. And the first year that they started, we actually had cantaloupe. They come to the band office and they say, here, have this. What is that? It's cantaloupe. Oh, where'd you get that? From the greenhouse. They actually grew it in Mistawasis. So they're growing fruits and vegetables, which they provide for the good food boxes for band membership. The community gardens, we're just starting those. It takes a bit to get them going, but now this year there's going to be 5. Food forest, I always look at Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, their food forest. It's so awesome. The variety they have in there, and it was so amazing. Last year they grew tobacco, and they're using that for ceremony. It's just so interesting. And Katherine just said, cut it off. So for now, I'll hand it over.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Keaton Sinclair, and this is my lovely wife, Alanna. And I'm a 4th generation farmer. We grew up on a mixed grain cattle operation near Rosetown. We currently live on the farm and incorporate regenerative practices into our operation, focusing on soil health and plant nutrient density. And I guess that's where we are in the city, or in the summer, and in the winter I work in engineering and she works in law. But we're called back to the land and we're focused on taking on the farm full time. And I have the privilege of taking on the farm, and my parents are even here today. So
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. We're a package deal. As you can see, we get 2 for 1 over here. So yeah, as Keaton said, I'm a lawyer. I do investigations, mediations, stuff to do with workplace stuff. Interestingly enough, to do with workplace resilience. Crossovers. We're seeing a pattern. But we're farmers as well. And I grew up in the Outlook area, and we were called back to the land. We did the city thing, but we go back to the land. And as Keaton said, we're trying to incorporate more regenerative agricultural principles. And within that, we are focusing on the soil health, the plants, the diversity of species, kind of divesting and reducing reliance on expensive chemical inputs, and adapting to our changing climate and trying to seek different sources of profit. And the way that we do that is acre by acre. Our company is called AKreGeneration. So that's our little play on words, is acre by AKRE, Alanna and Keaton. It's not really funny to spell out a joke, but we like wordplay, so here we go. So yeah, I'll leave it at there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. We're doing good. One of the approaches we wanted to take with telling the story, and I think it's important for the day and age that we live in, and the way that we come to know each other, a lot of ways through social media or through digital and virtual contexts, is we often just show the highlights of our lives, the trophies, the successes, the vacations, like the smiles. And that's not the whole story. And I'm a big proponent of the struggle and the challenge and the failure, because that's who our teachers are. And the successes are often just the trophy on the wall, but they're not the teachers, and that's not the journey that got you to the place. And most of the learning to be done is through challenges. And we often keep those in the shadows of how we failed and stuff. So we wanted to bring that to the forefront in telling this story. There's a wide swath of stories and approaches at this circle. So I wanted to, with that in mind, telling the story and part of your journey, what have the challenges and the failures and the struggles been that have brought you to this point now, in front of these guests, sharing your story. So we'll go to you, Michaela.
Okay, so I'm gonna use kind of, I guess, a broad example of this showing up in my work, and I think it was really embedded throughout, which is super important. But as many of us are likely aware, planning processes for adaptation to climate change and how we think about climate change and how we understand it have become more complex over time. And in my work, we're considering, how do we integrate these really important social elements of the problem into our solutions to the problem. They're very important, but they're very complicated. And so figuring out how to do that was absolutely, completely a process of trial and error. I think that the kind of starting point that we began from was kind of based on existing best practice for planning for adaptation, and it was a little bit linear, it was cyclical, but there were kind of these clear steps and stages and checkpoints, and all of those things are very helpful and important. But when we're thinking about building in this complexity, we kind of quickly realized that we had to let go of the need to check the box and move on. And we had to get really good at hopping back and forth. And the process was not a nice circle with clear steps and stages. We did do the things we needed to do, but it was very, very messy, very tangled. And I think it looked more like a scribble than anything representing kind of order. And so I think that iteration and the need to be able to embrace iteration. And when we think about adaptation, we know it's a process, we know it's ongoing, we know there's constant learning and reframing and rethinking and adjusting to new information involved. But I think kind of for me, wrapping my head around how do I actually move from being trained in kind of linear thinking and orderly processes towards more flexibility and kind of building adaptation and building resilience into even the way that we think about problems, the way that we interact with each other, and the way that we make sure that people continue to be involved in the process of planning and decision making and kind of step into their own power as they respond to that. So I think failure in my context is everything. And to use a cliche, I think just kind of thinking about failure as opportunity, as learning, which is what we're all here for. So yeah, I think failure is wonderful.
What was that again? The hardships that okay. I go back to our community and how we were before land code. And we'd have different projects, different people coming out, professionals, experts, and they would say, this is good for you, this is good for you, and this is good for you. And we'd be there saying, oh yeah, okay, okay. And then as part of the mindset change with land code and understanding the responsibility that came with that, came the understanding that, wait, we can decide what we want. We know what's best for us, but it took a while to do that. And it never really came to, I never realized it until I was asked, what does being the only Indigenous-led living lab in Canada mean to you? And I was like, yeah, okay, good question. What does that mean? And I think what it meant was that for once we were leading the experts. We were saying, this is what we want. How now you figure out how to give us what we want. And an interesting example is that so we bought, as part of my work, we bought a half section of land on right on the border of Mistawasis. Very light land, never should have been worked. So when we bought it, we just left it. And after 10, 15 years, it was basically staying the same. There was some regrowth, but hardly any. So we worked with Ducks Unlimited, and again, that's a timing thing. We needed some input and some expertise, and Ducks Unlimited came along, and then working with our Bridge Land Water Sky and the experts that they provided. So we put a fence around here and said, okay, we're going to put, what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to make it a pasture. Okay. For us, pasture is, okay, brome, alfalfa, just traditional grasses that you put in there. And then, so we're saying, okay, is that what we want to do? Well, no, we've got all these experts. So let's have them talk to each other. So as part of the email chain, and it was so amazing that the back and forth and on what we can try. And he said, how about this? And we said, how about you guys figure out if there's something that you've been wanting to try and never had the guts or never had the opportunity, try it here. So we ended up in that pasture. We have 9 different types of grass seeds. We have ryegrasses from the drought areas down in southern Saskatchewan, plus of course the Ducks Unlimited and their pollinator blend. And it was and the other part of it was that we wanted to seed this half section, but it was light land, so we didn't want to work it up. So it was just kind of roughed up a little bit with a cultivator, and one of our band member small farmers went in there, and he had a rough time. He was bouncing all over the place, but he seeded it, and it caught. And this year is the first time we're actually, now we have cattle out there that we're renting the pasture for. But that's something that we've got, and so we're going to take that philosophy, and we've done that in the northeast corner of Mistawasis. It's all lighter land, sloughs and bush and that. And 5 years ago we had 0 pasture, and now we have on Mistawasis we have 13 quarters that were fenced off. Along with our trust property, we have another 10, and so we're becoming managers of pasture land. And we implemented our first ever pasture management plan, and we're looking forward to that part is developing watering systems for the whole patch so we can manage it properly. But that, I believe that that's the biggest thing that I come forward is that I get to share some of the stuff that Mistawasis is doing. But the credit all goes back to Mistawasis and the support that they share with our lands department. And yeah, I guess I'll just leave it from there. Thank you.
On on the farm, I guess the very first year where we farmed our own land, we had a few challenges for sure. It was the start of a drought. The peas are ready to harvest, and cloud comes through and hails it all out. All the peas are on the ground, and that was the start of probably it's been 4 or 5 years now in a drought. So, we immediately started to, realize we needed to improve our management practices and, make some changes to become more resilient for the changing climate and, improving our soil health. And that was kind of the big thing that we wanted to focus on right away.
We could have chosen to farm for the crop insurance. A lot of folks do that, right? And we didn't want to do that because it didn't really align with our values that we had for our for the land. So we wanted to do something different. And the first thing that I thought of was turning to regenerative principles. And the reason for that is because my brother-in-law had been doing that sort of work years prior with his cattle operations. He had been changing his pasture land into diverse species and doing all sorts of neat things that everyone thought were very wacky, but were actually quite ancient principles, really. It's going back to mimicking and stewarding the land as it was at one point. So that's what we were looking at, and Keaton, with his science brain, dove very deep into that material. I think he's read almost any book out there on regen stuff or soil science and listened to years worth of podcasts at this point. So if you have any questions, you can ask him.
I like the data and the numbers.
Absolutely. So I'm more like, high level, but he's detail oriented and really good at that. And we also talked about it with our families, and we had a lot of conversations about like, where do we go from here, given what we think is coming? And one of the conversations I recall is a conversation we had under the stars with his aunt Cindy, and she's a Métis scholar in Alberta and from here, and she really encouraged us and talked about the respect for the land and how the things that we were proposing to do are a more like decolonial way of approaching working with the land, right? And through that encouragement, it gave us strength to try out some of these practices, like I said, that aren't particularly new, maybe some new science that goes along with them, but very ancient in spirit. And she said to us that Métis families have been adapting for generations, right? Since they started with the fur trade. So it was just a very natural progression for our family to consider.
Awesome. Thank you. The next round of like sharing the stories, I think we can all appreciate it, but there is a lot of polarity and division in our social landscape. And, it's easy to be in a room like this with a lot of support and nodding heads, but that's not really reflective of the broader social climate. And I'm a big proponent of shared knowledge and hearing other people's stories. And I wanted to bring that theme about. So with the theme of like us versus them, I guess, can you share some perspectives or anecdotes on like how you have gained ground or built bridges or come to share knowledge with other people. And I think that would be a great opportunity, you know, if others even want to share at the end some of that journey. I think that's where, you know, there's a lot of knowledge in this room, but also there's a lot of knowledge that's not in this room with differing views. And I think if we can bring that knowledge base together with a shared understanding is how we're going to make, that's the recipe for resilience. You know, it can't be just one-sided too. So I'll honor the clockwise circuit and hand it to you, Michaela.
All good. Okay. Yeah, I love talking about concepts, but I'm actually going to use an example this time. So concrete things. This showed up really clearly and early on in the work that I did with the Wig River First Nation. As a social scientist and a settler coming into an Indigenous community, I showed up reading a lot of theory and literature and understanding this concept of reflexivity, which is really important for this type of work, which is just this critical self-analysis and unpacking of our own assumptions and biases that are just inherent in the way that we grew up and where we came from. And so I had been doing that and working on that. And yet I showed up with a very Western scientific approach to thinking about and understanding climate change. And that's okay. That's used very often when we do this type of work. But we started with interviews to get a sense of local knowledge on how is the environment changing, how is the land and weather changing, how is this affecting you and your life, and then kind of what do you think we should do about it. And as always, the local community knows the most about their land, about their environment, about their experience. And so those interviews were very, very rich. What the interviews also showed us, though, was that there were three very distinct and very different perspectives on how the problem of climate change was being understood by different groups in the community. So there was a beaver or Danaza cultural Indigenous understanding of that problem. And they told the story in a distinct way, and they shared that knowledge with me in a distinct way. And then there was a group of people in the community who had a similar to my own kind of Western empirical understanding of climate change. And then there was a group of people in the community who were skeptical of Western approaches to understanding the problem of climate change, and who I think we risked losing right away at the outset of the project if we weren't careful about the way that we asked questions and the way that we tried to bring people together. Because even the term climate change and using that term to describe what we were talking about, as we know, it has the potential to be divisive in certain contexts. And so what we had to do was say, okay, we've got very different understandings of this problem. What is it that we're actually trying to do together, though? Fortunately, in this case, it wasn't climate change mitigation. We're working at the local level. We're looking to adapt. We're looking to make the community more resilient. And so the problem that we were trying to solve wasn't what's causing climate change, which would have been a very difficult one to solve in that context. The problem we were trying to solve was how do we make sure that the community is safe and resilient and can protect their well-being and the well-being of each other as these changes continue to happen. And so despite those very distinctive differences in how people were thinking about the problem, it was really clear that everyone in the community could agree changes are happening. We've seen them, we can feel them, we know how they're affecting us, and we have ideas about what we want to do to respond to them. And so what we did was in our rest of our work with the community and in our presentations, we relied kind of heavily on their Beaver cultural framing of climate change, which was really highly esteemed among all the community members. It was kind of a shared framing that worked for everyone. And so we kind of used that framing, and we talked about environmental change, changes in the weather, changes in the land, and the very real impacts that they were having. And that that was our area of mutual agreement that we could start from. But it really did require a pretty hefty reframing and thinking through and challenging of assumptions that I don't think that I could have done in advance, even though I tried to. Yeah.
What was that again?
To connect with others who have a different way of knowing. Yeah.
Right, right. Relationship building, key. I talk about bridge to land, water, sky, Indigenous led with Mistawasis and Muskeg Lake Cree Nation. I was the brainchild of one of our band members, Anthony Johnston. Strong believer in relationship building. We have great relationships with the U of S, Ag and Agri-Food Canada, Ducks Unlimited, and now with Muskeg Lake. Even though we're only 15 miles apart, due to our history and mainly in sports, where competing against each other and it didn't foster the working together environment. And so yes, we were neighbors, but we weren't. I always think of the corner gas when they mentioned one town and spit. That was kind of like our relationship, a love-hate relationship, even though you have family in both sides. But now we have a great relationship with Muskeg, and it's evolving. And again, it comes back to that relationship that we have shared needs. We're so close here. What happens in Muskeg happens in Mistawasis and vice versa, and we can work together and try and, if not solve, mitigate some of the problems, or we can stay apart and try to find our own way again. Our relationships with the organizer, Chuck was here talking Ducks Unlimited. Before my relationship or our relationship with Ducks Unlimited was not very good because I dealt with them in the additions to reserve process. And as part of that process was Ducks Unlimited had to give up their easements for a replacement agreement as part of the whole transition to reserve status. And nobody really built that relationship with Ducks Unlimited and was always adversarial. So we changed that. We started talking with Ducks Unlimited. We worked with them and through our land code, because it's a much more complicated process through a land code when we were under the Indian Act, because we have to come up with solutions. So with Ducks Unlimited, we adopted basically the Saskatchewan Conservation Easement Act and made our own land law. And now Ducks Unlimited we will be the first in Saskatchewan and maybe even Canada, where we're going to have a conservation easement with Ducks Unlimited under Mistawasis land law. And it took a lot of work, a lot of talking and understanding that we, even though we're different organizations, we have the same shared vision. When we talk about environment, we talk about forever. And when we talk about environment, a fence does not divide. What happens on one side of it happens on the other. And for too many years, that's what's been happening. Things in the province, all of a sudden, everything seems to change when it comes to a reserve line. No, it doesn't. And those are some of the things that as we evolve amongst ourselves and understand all of this better, I don't know. I don't know how to word it because I don't know it yet. And when I do understand it and I do come to that realization, then I'll share it.
Awesome.
On the, I guess, perspective on the farm. Yeah, we, I guess, always feel like we're up against, the neighbors talking about what we're doing in the field and, working with some of the big ag companies, the agronomists that are, they're selling the product, so they're going to be, giving you certain recommendations to put more down, put more of this, so I think, the us versus them, we have a lot of skepticism, whether it's at Coffee Row or a neighbor driving by. But I think as I'm talking to more neighbors and they're understanding more of what the intent is of, for example, I tried a few fall cover crops, multi-species, diverse mix that, has the intent of improving water infiltration, you know, a few other things, but I guess they're questioning, and once they, they start listening to what the intent is, and okay, that's interesting, and it's, the intent is long term to improve profitability, then, we have a few more years, interested in what that means and what's that going to do to their operation.
Something.
Yep.
Especially when they find out that you get the same yield, but you didn't use as many expensive inputs, right? And it's, oh, what? You got the same amount that I did, but you didn't have to spray X, Y, and Z. That's like thousands of dollars of savings, right? So when they see dollar signs, then there's interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A few other practices that I've tried, maybe learning opportunities is a good word. We put down some gypsum as a soil amendment, and the one supplier as well as one of the neighbors were wondering, like, what's this supposed to do? And like, oh, that looks ridiculous. Like, you're putting way too much down, you're going to hurt your crop, or, but the next year that everything grew right through that area that used to be a heavy sodium alkali area. And so they're like, oh, this is interesting. Like once they see some results, then, I think we're sort of making that connection. Like this could be something they could incorporate into their farming operation. And, they're always interested to hear more of what other things that we're trying. And yeah, this year we're, I guess, doing some intercropping, some pea canola, some lentils, mustard. And so I'm taking the neighbor out to do some crop checking with him, and he's really interested on how everything works. Essentially, yeah, the intercropping is planting two different crops in the same row to improve water infiltration, reduce pest disease, and reduce a chemical pass as well, reduce fertilizer. The one plant will fix nitrogen and support the other plant that likes nitrogen and some of the other nutrients, where they kind of have a symbiotic relationship, where as well as I should say the operation side for the harvest management is improved as well. You're harvesting in one pass. The smaller crop will stand up better with the other crop, and then afterwards you have to separate them to sell them. But it's definitely a little bit different from most of the monocrops, the nice clean crops that we normally like to see in our area. So it definitely gets the neighbors talking.
We plant it from as far away from the road as possible.
Sometimes.
Thank you for sharing. Key points that I heard from the sharing is like the flexibility to be like resilient as an individual to adapt to the situation with working with others. Really working on relationship, as a way to bring people together. And then what I really heard with you is like the willingness to be vulnerable and be open and let people look and learn. And you don't know how it's going to work, but you're willing to share that. So I think a lot of barriers come down when we are just open. We can be resilient and we can be vulnerable with others. It's a very welcoming place, and it's a place where a lot can be learned, but a lot can be given as well. And one of the things, that's important, I think, when we go out and interact with people in the world and engage is like with that us and them. It really is just us. And, I hear a lot of elders speak, and, when they greet you as all my relations, that's a huge gift to say, we are all one people. And, I think taking that to heart and carrying that with you on your walk is a real thing. So I commend all of you for sharing that and for living it in a real way. So we have a bit of time left. We're going to enter into our last. When you walk, you don't start with your feet. You lean forward with your head, and then your feet follow. And, teaching kids to ride your bike is like, don't look at the hole or the ditch. Look where you want to go. So having a vision is very important and critical. It's easy to see all the problems and the challenges. They're coming at you hot and fast. But doing our last round, what is your vision about, successful climate resilience with community, larger, smaller, and micro? I guess I'll hand it over. Thanks.
It's complicated. I think that the vision for successful resilience depends on what we decide that we want. And I think that the decision about what we decide that we want should be a collective one. And so I think kind of, being able to individually and at a community level and more broadly, just as people step into our power to say, what do we collectively envision? How do we get there? And also when we're making these decisions, how do we make sure that the voices we're always hearing aren't the ones that we're always hearing? How do we involve people in a meaningful way? So I think it requires more nuance, more complexity, more diversity than many of us are comfortable with. And I think it requires a humility and a vulnerability, like you touched on. But ideally, I think moving towards an understanding of ourselves as part of a community, again, whether that's at any scale, but an accountability to our community and how do we show up for each other. I think that's what it requires. Yeah, that was not specific or concrete, but those are my thoughts.
Vision. I remember this question, Katherine. One of several, but the biggest one is having bison return to Mistawasis. And we are well on our way. We should be having a small herd. We're starting off with 20 head next year, sometime next year. We're getting a fence put up this year, and then we'll go from there. But bison, not only spiritually as part of our culture, but in our food security program as well. We have visited different communities, the one, Pepixis and Standing Buffalo. Similar processes they go through, but they treat it differently. But ultimately, they knock down 3 animals 4 times a year and share that with community members. They share bison meat at their ceremonies. They use parts of the animal. If a band member is doing ceremony and they need a buffalo rope, then they donate it to them. It just culturally, it strengthened the community. An interesting comment from Alan Bird from Pepixis, because we always hear that you bring buffalo bison back, other animals will come, and the native grasses and that will come back. Well, one of the things that he said was surprising, but their community changed. Their community improved. They got along better when the bison came home, and that's one of our vision. The other one, and it came from a question again regarding our living labs, and the question was, if I came out to Mistawasis to tour your living labs, what would I see? Well, if we are successful with our living labs, you actually won't see anything, because what the ultimate goal is to have, or what you'll see is how Mistawasis looked 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and that's the goal. That's the vision, and to have our lakes as pristine as they are today, 30, 40 years ago from now, not ago. But yeah, and that's basically it. Is just trying to look after our band members, look after Mistawasis, and make sure that my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren know that Mistawasis is still there, and they can benefit, if not as much as I did, they can benefit from it. So that's it.
Thank you. I'm curious, Roger, could you tell us more, like what it means to your community members to see the land returned to them and to see it being restored?
That's a good question. Because when we first started this, I probably wouldn't be able, it probably wouldn't be a positive answer. Because again, it's the mindset is that, yes, Mistawasis is our home, but it's looked after by somebody else. And so there was no buy-in, there was no, almost like we had no skin in the game. If something happened on Mistawasis, we would get somebody else to look after it, somebody else to deal with it. And so now that we're moving down this path with our land code and just being more responsible. I don't like talking about self-governing or anything like that, because to me it's just being responsible for where you live. And now our band members, absolutely, they're starting to understand that there's I get calls all the time saying, hey, you have those cows in that pasture too long. The grass is looking 5 years ago when we first had a pasture, they didn't know. They just would leave it up to you. Now they're showing that concern. Now there's concern. We have band members that in their travels, they bring their concerns to our lands committee. So and part of that as well is trying to get our youth. We have two high school teachers. One is a band member, one is a non-band member. They try very hard to get that participation from the youth. And I know with the presentation yesterday regarding youth, that's where we need to go. That's where we need our young people to, because I'm just about done here. And I need somebody to carry that on. And I want the vision that I see. I want our kids to see that as well and want that. And so it's a long way of answering the question, but I think I got there.
Yeah, for regenerative practices and regenerative agriculture, the focus is always on the soil health. So the vision, I guess, for the farm is just to continue to build soil organic matter, carbon sequestration. Carbon is the life for our plants and keeping everything healthy, and that balance with the natural ecosystem. So we're really focused on that to build resiliency into the system. If there's a drought or if there's a flood, we've increased our water infiltration into the soil, and it's kind of our one asset. The soil is our asset that we need to take care of, that we can't get any more of, right? So yeah, I think that's a big one. And also just as more people get interested and we're kind of going with the trend, I think there's going to be more eyes on it all the time. It's about talking and sharing stories and, working through those failures and learning from them with, your local farming community. And yeah, these are the types of platforms that help make that happen too.
I don't really have anything to add because he said that so well. But I'll just extend a thank you for listening to our stories, and we would love to chat more with any of you, and I'm sure Keaton will answer your technical details.
Thank you. So I appreciate again this sharing. I hear like a vision for listening and including others and all voices, and then a vision for both, connecting back to tradition, but also a vision of an empowered and engaged youth. I think that's really important. And then a vision for the healthy soil, but the land, I think really coming back to the land as an individual to be like, I care about you. I care for your well-being. So that sincere inherent want for the well-being of all those facets is really a great circle. Yeah. So was that let's do, so we're doing good for time. There's opportunity for questions. We have a little bit of time before we have to go to questions. Is there any last words before we hand it over to the lower down floor? Roger.
Always have time for last words. One thing I sometimes go back to the conversation that Katherine and I had, and we're talking about treaty. And because we're in Treaty 6 territory and there's been discussion around treaty, the discussion was Treaty 6 was signed 150 years ago. And the main reason that Chief Mistawasis signed the treaty was that he saw that things were changing. The buffalo were gone. And his people needed to adapt to the changes, adapt or perish. And now 150 years later, we're at that same point. Except this time it's the climate, and we either need to adapt or perish. And so I think that's a good contact that, things that happened 150 years ago, maybe we can use those same visions to help us for the next 150.
Thank you, Roger. There is a lot of leadership and wisdom, demonstrated in that. So thank you. So we'll open the floor for questions. I'm going to start. I'm going to have to peek for the online. Sorry. Okay, Keaton, what's your favorite podcast? Science podcast.
Yeah, I listen to like probably a dozen different ones, but some of I guess a local favorite I like is Rural Roots to Climate Solutions. That's a good one. If you like getting into the details, you can listen to John Kemp's Advancing EcoAg podcast. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks. And then circling to the room, Branimir.
Thank you for your presentation and contribution. I have a question for Roger, and maybe Katherine can pitch in, but primarily for Roger. You talk about Bridge Land Water Sky, which is a part of the Cross Canada Living Labs research projects. What is unique with Bridge to Land Water Sky is trying to solve and help community solve its problem, or try to community strengthen the community rather than collection of individuals like other living labs. What is unique is trying to, in addition to restore marginal land, you're introducing bison, and also you're trying to strengthen the capacity of your community, train the young people, which is unique compared to others. My question is related to your comment, what happens on one side of the fence happens on the other. In your community, Mistawasis, Nêhiyawak, and also Muscat Lake, people connected with the culture and the same values, so similar values. That's on one side of the fence. On the other side of the fence, in the watershed, and I'm thinking it's relatively easy if we think about the Redberry Lake biosphere region, which is your communities include. What is your vision? What is your hope that some of the solutions that you're trying to do will be more accepted in communities which has more kind of a frontier mentality and values rather than community-based and health of the environment as a priority? How do you see, is it possible to share that vision with communities around you? Let's say within the confines of Redberry Lake biosphere region.
Thank you. That's a loaded question. There's a lot in there, but I think I think we try to keep it simple by relationships, and because like you said, we all have shared experiences. We all share the same area. Things that happen. Blaine Lake, which is close to the Redberry biosphere, their main base, happens in Leask, happens in Mistawasis. We're downstream from Iroquois Lake. We take an active role when there's any kind of new development proposed for Iroquois Lake, because what happens there will affect Mistawasis. We have resort communities to the west of Mistawasis, Emerald Lake, Martins Lake, which is closer to Muskeg, Iroquois Lake, and Pebble Bay, which is on Iroquois Lake. When there was issues, Pebble Bay Associated reached out to Mistawasis, and we worked together to try and solve an issue. We have people living in the Emerald Lake Resort that want to access Mistawasis lands. We have over 5,000 acres of, I'll call it pristine forest. It's jack pine forest, but nothing was ever done with it for, I don't know, forever. And that's something that is valued. And so now we have people living in Martins Lake and Emerald Lake that want to go out into our area. So we're going to be working with them to develop some kind of a pass system so that they're not just driving all over. There's trails that they can follow. We really emphasize working with our local RMs because what happens we're part of Leask RM and Canwood RM. Same thing, the fence is there, but what happens in Leask RM happens in Canwood RM. So I guess to answer the question is that we rely on relationships and the understanding that the RMs are having the same issues that Mistawasis is having, and we can empathize with each other and build on those relationships that I went to school in Leask from grade 1 to grade 11. Then I left, and it's the whole other story. But that is just built on lifelong relationships and the understanding that we're all in the same boat. Don't fight against each other. Let's work together.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Good. Well, there was one more online, but are we done? I see it's noon. Okay, no total. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your sharing and giving. So thanks everyone.
Yeah.